First story. My entitled sister demanded that I give my camper to my nephew. Then tried to steal it. Now she is behind bars, and I had to take in my nephew. My sister and her husband went through hard times because of the pandemic. They went from renting a nice house to having to rent a room from a friend. It was supposed to be temporary, but they've been in his house for an entire year. And he didn't have more than one room to spare to rent to them. I have a family of my own, and my house is full, so I didn't want them to live with me. But I have a vintage camper trailer in my backyard. One of those small ones they called a canned ham type. It's had various repairs over the years, including redoing the floor and ceiling as well as getting a new axle. And it's in pretty decent condition for being over 50 years old. I take this camper on yearly trips with friends and on camping trips with my family. And I'm very anxious about its upkeep. My sister, though, has asked to borrow the camper numerous times to put it in her friend's backyard, so her teenage son could have some privacy and use it as a personal bedroom. But I know my nephew. He's destructive with everything and would turn my camper into a total mess. And I'm certain they wouldn't want to give it back whenever I needed it because he'd already be living in it. I know they can't simply go out and get a camper of their own because ones in usable condition are not cheap. And right now they are trying to save every extra dime to get back on their own feet. Recently, my sister has gotten our parents involved, and they think I should just lend them the camper. But I've still refused. They won't let up and seem to think that if they keep hounding me as a collective, I'll give in. But I haven't. My wife is on my side and has refused to let my sister and brother-in-law in when I wasn't home. They have a vehicle that can tow the camper, so I don't trust them not to take it if they can get into my backyard. My house also has cameras, and my sister and Bill are aware of them now. They say I'm tall because I only use the camper a few times a year, and they need it now. But I worry that they wouldn't want to give it back, much less return it in the same condition. I firmly believe I'm right. But with my parents and sister constantly breathing down my neck, I thought I'd come here for an unbiased opinion. AITA for not lending them the camper. Info. I did suggest they get my nephew a tent. But they shot that idea down and called a tent temporary. If anything, that just felt like another red flag to me. More info. Our parents do not live close anymore. They moved several states away to retire a few years ago. Update. I showed my sister and Bill this post after getting the verdict. My parents have seen it as well. They are all very unhappy with me. But my parents have backed off and say they won't bother me with it again. I also spoke with my sister alone and went through the rough estimates of what possible repairs to the camper would be should my nephew damage it. My sister was not happy to see those numbers. Then I called her out about how they'd likely not want to return the camper when I needed it. But they also tried to come to my house when I wasn't home to take it without permission. And I told her I'd have no problem calling the police if they ever tried that. My sister still tried to say her son needed the camper. But when I went through the comments on this post with her, she became incredibly embarrassed and then got very angry. She left, saying she wouldn't bother me for the camper anymore. But she still stated that she thinks I'm a jerk. I didn't reply because I knew she was waiting to gaslight me. I just waved her goodbye and she left. My Bill called me shortly after to yell at me. But he had no leg to stand on other than what they wanted. I told him I'd contribute $100 for a tent. But they're on their own for the rest. They actually agreed to the $100. So I guess my nephew is getting a tent to live in. I'd like to thank everyone here for all their great advice. You gave me what I needed to end this problem. Comments. Magcrub. YTA you gave them $100. What the F? That's all. Anyway, from what little information you have given, I think you could have done a lot more. Why don't sister and partner live in a camp? Why not help pay for a more comfortable tent $500 plus ones? Just because they have given up does not mean you were right. And unless your relationship with your sister was seriously effed up, you are an arsehole. Give up your camper holidays for a year. And ask for weekly pictures of the camper. OP. Boy, do you know nothing? My relationship with my sister has never been great. Growing up, she was a troubled teen who got into a lot of trouble. And yes, I did try to help her. I tried supporting her many times over the years. But it can't be at the cost of my own family. My wife and kids are my own priorities. I can't have my sister and Bill living with me because not only is my house full, but my sister and Bill are, as some would say, toxic AF. And besides the fact that my sister and Bill pretty much tried to steal the camper, it's not big enough for them to all live in it. It's got enough bed space, but it's way too small for 3 people to actually live long term. And my nephew alone, if he were to live in it, would be almost guaranteed to destroy my camper. He'd let moldy food pile up and wouldn't clean, and he broke things without a care. Plus, I pretty much know my sister and Bill would not give the camper back when I needed it once they had it, unless I got the court or police involved. There is even a huge worry that my sister and Bill might actually use the camper to cut and run. And then I might never get it back. My nephew may not currently have a room, but he isn't without a roof over his head. My sister and Bill just wanted the camper because it'd make my nephew easier to deal with. I gave them that $100 because a tent would work just fine if all my nephew is doing is living in the backyard. The climate is warm here anyway. They just honed in on the camper, and once they said they wanted it, they tried whatever means to try and get it. If they were literally penniless and on the streets, then yeah, they could have lived in the camper to get back on their feet. But they aren't penniless and on the streets. They are both employed and rent a room in a friend's house. And last time I saw my nephew, he didn't seem to care much about it, as he's pretty much always on a device of some kind. He's not little either. He's 15. Update. Hi everyone. A few days ago, I saw an animation of my old post on YouTube and decided to log back on and give everyone an update. I just want to say that things seemed to get better after I made my sister and Bill give up on borrowing my camper. If they'd gotten their hands on it, I likely wouldn't have gotten it back anytime soon, short of getting the police or a lawyer involved. They even tried to show up at my house to take the camper while I wasn't home, and my wife had to keep them out. I showed my last post to my sister, Bill, and parents, and they were furious at me, but let go of the fact that my camper was not up for grabs out of sheer humiliation and embarrassment. They had no real logical way to argue with me, especially after I brought up the amount of money that could end up being owed to me in repairs should they or my nephew damage the camper. That part made my sister extra sore at me. I thought we'd closed the book on this whole mess, but it seems closing one book only opens another one. Things went downhill very badly a bit over a month after my original post. So badly, I couldn't believe it was really happening. And yet, it did. Many here may not believe it either. But here's what happened. Some wondered if my sister and Bill were going to actually use the $100 I gave them to get my nephew a tent to have his own space in the backyard. I admit I had my doubts, but they followed through on getting him one. Our parents sent them some money as well, and they got my nephew a good-sized tent that he can have a cot to sleep on in and a small amount of simple furniture. I personally donated the cot, as I had an old Coleman one sitting in my garage, unused for years. I gave him a folding camping chair too. The boy got electricity in the tent via an extension cord from the main house. However, he frequently complained about the heat during the day, and only had a couple of those little pseudo-air conditioners that you just put water in to keep his tent cool. Though honestly, I doubt this situation would have been any different if he had my camper, because it can get pretty hot inside of it too. Now, onto what happened a bit over a month later. My sister and Bill were evicted from their friend's house. Apparently, while there was trouble with my nephew needing his own space and being messy and defiant, they were having more trouble with the friend who was also their landlord. They tried to smooth things over by putting their son in the tent, so he wouldn't be in the house much to avoid trouble. I suppose that might have worked had my sister and Bill not been caught with illegal drugs. And I mean the very bad ones. The kind that uses a syringe. Their friend or landlord went into their room while they were away and found their stash. That's why they were evicted. Suddenly, it made sense why, in 2 years, they couldn't afford a small apartment to move into despite both of them working full-time. Their extra cash just went right to their habits instead of saving it like they claimed to have been doing. Looking back, they did look a bit more unhealthy at the time, but I assumed it was due to stress. And not long after being outed, their habits put them behind bars. People who are on heavy drugs can go very wild in an instant. And that's exactly what happened. When their friend landlord gave them an eviction notice for having found the drugs in his house, my sister and Bill both got physical with him, and he called the police. That scared them, and they locked themselves in their rented room. Meanwhile, my nephew was blissfully unaware of what was happening, as he was just gaming alone in his tent. The friend landlord pressed charges, and police soon arrested my sister and Bill, because there were indoor security cameras that caught the whole altercation. I was very surprised by what happened when I heard about it. I got a call from the police station, and I was asked to take in my nephew, since he could no longer stay where he was. Since our parents are far away and living in a retirement community, they couldn't take him in. So it was up to me, and I did so. I wasn't particularly fond of my nephew, but I realized his upbringing really did not help our relationship, nor did the fact that my sister and I don't really get along. We brought his tent over to my place and set it up in my backyard. He's still living in it, even though we've cleared the attic out for him. But he says he likes the tent better because it feels like his own little house where he can just be himself. We've even added a mini fridge I bought in there for him, so he can have cold drinks when he wants them. Currently, we're still working on becoming my nephew's permanent legal guardians. My sister and Bill are both facing heavy charges. They assaulted a man, resisted arrest, and were in possession of illegal drugs. From jail, though, they've actually been very cooperative, albeit while dealing with withdrawing from no longer being able to self-medicate. I've been to see my sister, and she said she and her husband were so out of it on the day it happened that they don't even remember attacking their friend. I don't know if they're faking memory loss to try and get a lesser punishment, or if they really were that high. But I suppose it doesn't matter. It changes nothing since there was CCTV showing the attack. They're looking into possibly getting a plea deal when they go to court in November. But even with that, they may be in prison until their son is at least 18 years old. I didn't have the heart to risk the foster care system for my nephew. My wife has had my back on this too, and we've been working as a team. My sister and Bill have signed over the title to their SUV to me. And the plan is to make it my nephew's vehicle when he gets older, since he'll be 18 in 3 years. Or we can sell it to get him something that uses a lot less fuel. I already had to pay to get the SUV back from the police impound. That's money, and I know I'm never going to get it back. When my sister and Bill get out of prison in a few years, they're not exactly going to have much to their name. So taking care of their son and making sure he grows up in a better environment feels like the least I can do. For those wondering about the drugs, it wasn't entirely out of left field. My sister was especially troubled in her teenage years and struggled with addiction in her early 20s to the same drug. She nearly got kicked out of college for it. Our parents always dug her out of the mire and helped her get back on her feet. They even paid for her rehab. We all thought she'd been clean for a long time, but she admitted to me when I visited her in jail that her husband also had the same addiction issues. That's actually how they met. Not in rehab, but in a focus group after the rehab. They did not admit this to any of us until recently. I'm not sure why. But with the stress they faced in the past 2 years, falling back into old habits became easy for them. I've tried checking up on their former landlord to ask if he was okay. However, he wants nothing to do with my family. He had some pretty offensive things to say when I went over to gather my sister and Bill's stuff. Once the police gave me the okay, and the man actually threatened to pull a gun on me while I was carrying out boxes. He said he thinks my family is all like a bunch of filthy white trash. So I don't feel as sorry for him as I did, since he's a pretty big jerk. My nephew also confirmed this. My kids weren't exactly receptive to their cousin being around them. There's a bit of an age gap between them, and they just don't relate to one another. And while my nephew is messy, we make him clean his tent once a week, and we make him shower at least 2 to 3 times a week. We live in a warmer climate, but now that the seasons are changing, it's cooling down a little bit to the point where he says the tent isn't so bad. He's got a tablet, a laptop, a DVD player, and a Nintendo Switch to occupy his time. But we keep these things in the house whenever my nephew isn't home. It's way easier to steal out of a tent than a house after all. Considering how angry my nephew was before, he rarely shows his temper now. Yes, he makes it hard to get him to do his chores. But as a whole, he's shown more improvement in a couple months than I saw in 3 years. He is extremely grateful, but he's also very solitary. We give him his space most of the time, and I make sure my kids don't bother him either. He's going through a lot right now. My nephew plays a lot of Zelda and Fortnite. At least those are 2 of the games he plays that I know of. My kids love those games too. We've also given my nephew the old 10-speed road bike I used to use years ago. He rides it to and from school, as we live about a mile away from the local high school. Thus far, most of the drama from him has been school-related. He had to change to a different high school and make new friends, which he wasn't particularly happy about. He really doesn't like doing his homework, and he's been fighting with his teachers. But that's a problem many parents face on a regular basis. He says he's made a few new friends though, and I'm thankful for that. We're taking things one step at a time, and so far, it's slowly getting better. My nephew has also talked of one day getting a part-time job. For the record, he brought this up, not me or my wife. He says he needs to be ready to be independent when he's 18. But we wouldn't kick him out just for getting older. He's one of our kids now too, after all. But if he's willing to work hard and move on to working full-time or going to college, we'll encourage him. I just don't want him to end up like either of his parents. He seems to be far better off mentally without their influence now anyway. It makes me regret not wanting to take him in sooner. But I didn't know how bad things really were. To think, this all started because my sister and Bill wanted my camper for their son. And those of you who said they potentially wanted it to skip town, if they'd gotten a hold of it, may very well have been right. They were on thin ice with their landlord and falling ever deeper into drug use. Thus far, my nephew has been completely indifferent to the camper, even though his tent is practically right next to it. He says that as long as he has his own space, he's fine. It reminds me of when I was his age. I enjoyed hanging out and spending nights in the old shed my parents made into a playhouse for me and my sister when we were kids. But we are still required to have a room ready for my nephew whenever a social worker checks up on us. He has the bulk of his stuff in the attic room, but he chooses to stay in the tent. The social worker didn't seem to mind since it was my nephew's preferred place to hang out, so long as an actual room was available to him. We also have a 7-foot-tall privacy fence all around the backyard and cameras too. That helps my nephew feel safe back there, at least. So for now, I think we have things covered. I probably won't update again, as it's pretty much a guarantee my sister and Bill are going to be locked up for a few years. Our parents are especially mad at them about it, and they have thanked me to no end for taking my nephew in. They want to fly over to visit this Christmas, so we can all spend time as a big family for the first time since before the pandemic. And before I go, I know some are probably going to ask where Bill's family is in all of this. Couldn't they help? Why didn't my sister and Bill ask them for help? Well, the answer is that they couldn't. I don't know a lot. But Bill spent the latter half of his own childhood in the foster system. His family isn't in his life. I don't know who they are or where they are. He hated them so much that he actually took my family name when he married my sister, so they aren't involved whatsoever with my nephew. Comment from OP. The tent is his happy place. I couldn't possibly take that away from him. He already had to deal with his parents being addicts, losing their previous home, having no space of his own for 2 years, and then his parents got arrested, and he nearly went into the foster system. That tent is his lifeline. That's why I focused on making it as comfortable as possible for him. Right down to giving him a mini fridge so he can have cold drinks without coming into the main house for them all the time. He's got a key, so he can come inside to use the bathroom day or night. But we don't force him to come in if he doesn't want to. To him, it's like a little house or apartment that's all his own, and it's keeping him calm. As for potential abuse, yes, I'm pretty sure he was emotionally abused, but not physically. He shows no signs of fear of being touched. He just tends to act aloof and indifferent. But he lets his true self out when you work with him. It's been baby steps. We even recently got him to come and play Monopoly on a family game night. I wouldn't really say he enjoyed it a lot, but he didn't hate it either. It's just going to take time to really make him feel that he's really at home with us. I'm not going to try to replace his own parents, but at the same time, I want him to know that he has parents who will do what it takes to help him succeed now. Second story. OP cheated on his wife with another girl, then realized his wife is the love of his life after effing his affair, as he didn't feel that pleasure when he had sex with his wife. Now having a meltdown, his wife filed for divorce without a second thought. My wife and I have a great relationship. I can't say I have any real complaints. We have been together for 5 years, married for 2 of those, and up until now, I would have said I would never stray. I was away for work last week, and while I was in the hotel, a young woman 21F sat next to me and began to flirt with me. I was extremely flattered by the attention. I have to admit it was a real ego boost to be flirted with by someone so young, as I've started to get that middle-aged dad bod and have been feeling like I'm losing my looks a bit. After a bit of talking, the woman invited herself back up to my hotel room, where we began to have sex. For me, it was all about the thrill of being desired by someone other than my wife, especially by a very young woman. I was slightly drunk, and I figured I'd probably never get the opportunity to sleep with a 21-year-old again. But the thrill wore off very quickly as I realized that I wasn't enjoying myself. This girl was not good in bed. She basically just laid there and starved. Sometimes she would pull herself into what she thought was a SXY pose. But that was it. She didn't seem interested in me at all. I might as well have been a human Bilbo because she seemed more interested in herself and how SXY she thought she was. Sex with my wife has always been amazing. When I'm with my wife, she's all over me, talking to me and telling me how hot I am, grabbing me, touching me, getting on top, and so on. I feel like the hottest guy in the world when I'm in bed with my wife. With this girl, I felt like I could leave the room, and she might not even notice, let alone care. She seemed like she just wanted the ego boost of a guy finding her attractive. I couldn't stay aroused, and I stopped about 10 minutes into it and asked her to leave, which she did. I didn't come. I just took a shower and then called my wife to hear her voice. Now I'm back home, and so far I haven't told my wife about any of it. There's a guilty part of me that says I should because she deserves to know, but another part of me says, why should I torpedo our happy marriage and cause her pain for something that I didn't even enjoy, and will never do again. All it did was prove to me that I want my wife more than anyone else. I want to do the right thing, but I genuinely don't know what the right thing to do is here. I know that I will never stray again. Should I tell her or keep it to myself? TLDR. I started to sleep with another woman, but backed out halfway through because I realized I loved my wife more. Should I even tell her about it? Relevant comments. The vast majority of commenters tell him to confess to his wife. I've picked some notable comments and his responses. Do not tell her about this. Don't blow up her world because you feel guilty. This is your burden to live with. Don't shift the burden onto her. Take that time and energy you'd have had to use repairing your relationship and helping her heal emotionally, and focus on improving your own self-worth, so you don't need some idiotic encounter with a stranger to make you feel worthy. OP. This is what I wonder if I should do. I'm never going to cheat or even come close to it again. I consider this my wake-up call. So I don't know what purpose her knowing about this would actually serve. Wouldn't it just hurt us both? But then again, I think if she slept with another guy, even if he didn't finish, I would want to know. If she was great, you definitely wouldn't have realized you still wanted your wife right in the middle of the sex. You probably would have realized after you finished. What did you use for protection? Do you take condoms with you on business trips? OP. The girl had a condom, luckily, so we did use protection. There would be no question about me telling my wife if we hadn't. You didn't start to cheat. You cheated. Hard stop. You worded it this way to make yourself not sound bad. Let me say it again. You cheated. Don't forget that you said you didn't enjoy it because you felt she wasn't that into it. Would you have felt bad and still stopped if you thought she was great in bed? Again, you cheated. OP. Okay, then yes, I cheated. I do take responsibility for that. I realize I've messed up. If she'd been great in bed, then I don't know. The fact that she was so bad brought me back to reality. But I think even if she had been great, I would still have realized that I ultimately just want my wife. What is it you hope your wife will gain from knowing this? OP. That's what I'm wondering. A lot of people are saying I should tell her, and I understand their point. But I just wonder what either of us will actually gain from that. It will hurt her deeply for no reason and possibly destroy our marriage. Difficult one. You cheated. She deserves to know. You're a piece of SHT. But then again, many people are, so you have solidarity. If you promise never to do it again, I'll forgive you. That's if you can live with the guilt. I wouldn't be able to. I'm not a better person than you. I can't advise. It's your choice. The greater good, as it were. Usually, I would say you have to give up. But she might leave you. I do understand your situation, though. Most here won't. It feels good to be wanted. But still, you messed up. It's all in your moral compass, my friend. The answer is there. But let me ask you, if you told your wife what happened, and she forgave you, would you still respect her? Or would you forgive her transgressions if she cheated on you? Nobody here should judge you. You know you messed up. Be honest and risk losing everything, or keep it quiet and live with that regret for the rest of your life. That's your decision and yours alone. OP. If my wife told me this same story, I don't know. I think I would forgive her. But it would be hard, and it would break my heart to hear it. I think the only thing that would stop it from totally destroying me is if she didn't enjoy it. Because if she did have sex with someone else and enjoyed it, that would shatter me. Update. I really took a beating from Reddit when I made my first post, so maybe some of you will be happy to read this update. Maybe not. I was still not sure whether to tell my wife what happened or not after making the post. This is not because I'm selfish like some of you said, but because I was struggling to find the logic in telling her something that would hurt her when she didn't need to know because it was never going to happen again. But I did also take on board what others said about how, if it were them, they would want to know. And to some point, I agreed with them about that. It didn't end up mattering because my wife realized something was up a few days after I got back from my work trip. She brought up how I'd been very quiet and seemed off ever since getting back. And she looked and sounded so worried about me that I decided in the moment to tell her. I didn't want us to have any secrets from each other. I told her everything. She didn't believe me at first. She believed I'd started to sleep with the other woman, but not that I had stopped or that the sex was bad. I showed her the Reddit post I made so she could see I wasn't just spinning her a flattering story to try and get off the hook. She started to cry while reading it, and then said the sentence that has been going round and round in my head 24/7 since then. I loved you so much. Loved. Past tense. I asked if she could really just fall out of love so quickly, and she said yes. In the space of a few minutes, I had gone from the love of her life And the man she wanted to grow old with too, just another sad man having a midlife crisis. We talked for most of the night, but she wouldn't budge. She turned down my offer of marriage counseling or counseling for just myself. I suggested we take a short week's break so she can think about things, but her mind is made up. We are filing for divorce, and in the meantime, I am sleeping in our spare room so she can remain in our marital bed. This is not how I wanted any of this to go. She is without a doubt the woman I love, and the woman I will always love. And if I could go back in time, I would lock myself in my hotel room for that entire work trip and only come out for the conference. I hold hope that she might one day change her mind all the same. Our connection is too strong to be destroyed by 30 minutes of poor decision-making. TLDR. I told my wife that I was unfaithful while away for work. We are getting a divorce. Relevant comments. In response to a now-deleted comment. OP. I will always love her. Even if she never agrees to come back, I will still love her. I don't know yet if she'll ever forgive me, but I'm going to make sure I'm a man who's worthy of her forgiveness. Bro, my dude, you messed up in a lot of ways. Try some therapy, even though she's divorcing you. P.S. I think you were extra scared to tell her because you knew just how strong her backbone was, and you knew you couldn't manipulate her out of it. OP. It wasn't that I wanted to manipulate her. If you knew her, you'd know she's not someone who can be manipulated by anyone, and I know her better than to even try. She does have a strong backbone, and when she feels strongly about something, she's all in. That's why I find it so unbelievable that she could fall out of love just like that, because she's a person who loves very deeply. I was scared to tell her because I knew that, just like all her other feelings about things, her sadness would be intense and very deeply felt, and I didn't want to be the cause of that. The people on this thread stink. Cheating happens. It's not excusable, but it's very forgivable. We are highly intelligent animals, but we are still animals. We have desires. Cheating is SHT. It's a SHTTY thing to do. Sometimes you have to make a mistake before you realize how much of a mistake it is. We all do regrettable things. That said, forgiveness doesn't have to happen. If your wife can't forgive you, then you have to live with that and work on moving on. Life is a series of mistakes, and you should learn from them so you can prevent them from moving forward. But mistakes don't define us. I hope you're able to eventually find solace. OP, thank you. In response to a now deleted comment. OP, I am happy to take all of the blame. I messed up. I know that. I am not interested in trying to make anyone else take responsibility for the mistakes I made. I am just interested in trying to make up for them in any way I can. Thank you for watching the video. If you are interested in listening to these kinds of stories, we've got more in store for you. Simply subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and share it with your friends.